You have probably scrolled past a video of Monaco without even registering it. A yacht the size of a building, a watch that costs more than a house, a hillside stacked with pastel apartments overlooking a harbor that looks unreal. Your brain files it under fantasy and moves on. But the real answer to how this happened is far stranger than fantasy. Monaco is not rich because of oil or minerals or farmland or any resource your ancestors would recognize as wealth. Monaco is rich because of a rock, a bankrupt royal family, and a very old trick your brain still falls for. Start with the rock. Monaco is smaller than New York's Central Park. 2 square kilometers, wedged between mountains and the Mediterranean Sea, with almost no farmland and no natural resources to speak of. For most of human history, that would have been a death sentence for any settlement trying to survive on its own, and for a long stretch, it nearly was. The Grimaldi family has ruled this rock since 1297, when a man named Francois Grimaldi, supposedly disguised himself as a wandering monk, talked his way past the gate of the fortress and let his armed cousins storm in behind him. It sounds like folklore because it mostly survives as folklore. But the deception at the heart of that story turns out to be a strangely accurate preview of how Monaco would keep surviving for the next 700 years. Not through strength, through appearance. For centuries after that, Monaco was poor, genuinely poor. It scraped by on trade, on fishing, on tolls, and on playing larger neighbors like France, Spain, and Sardinia against one another just to avoid being swallowed whole. Political scientist Kendall Stiles, in his research on small state survival strategies, describes this exact pattern. Tiny states without military power surviving for centuries by making themselves useful or interesting, or simply too inconvenient to conquer rather than by being strong. Monaco perfected inconvenience as a survival skill long before it perfected luxury. Then in 1860, disaster arrived disguised as a treaty. Monaco was forced to give up 95% of its territory. 2 wealthy towns under its control, Menton and Roquebrune, broke away, taking most of Monaco's tax revenue with them. What remained was a fortress rock with almost no economy left standing. Prince Charles III inherited a principality that was, by any normal measure, finished. Here is where the story stops being about geography and starts being about psychology. Because what saved Monaco was not a new resource, it was a very old idea about exclusivity dressed up as a casino. In 1863, Charles III opened a gambling house on the rock. Gambling was illegal in France at the time, which meant Monaco had something its enormous neighbor did not wealth, access. A short carriage ride from the French border, wealthy Europeans could do something they legally could not do at home. The casino, later formalized under a company called the Société des Bains de Mer, was not really selling roulette, it was selling permission. Why did that work so well? Why would people cross a border just to lose money in a room when they could easily gamble somewhere closer if the goal were purely entertainment? This is where an old piece of human wiring comes into focus. Evolutionary psychologist Jeffrey Miller has spent decades studying what researchers call costly signaling. The basic idea is simple. Anything that is expensive, wasteful, or difficult to fake becomes a reliable signal of status, precisely because a poor imitator cannot afford to fake it convincingly. A peacock's tail is a costly signal, so is a diamond. So, it turns out, is a losing hand of cards inside a marble room that ordinary people are not even allowed to enter. Monaco's casino was never really competing on odds or entertainment value. It was competing on exclusivity, and exclusivity is one of the oldest currencies your brain understands. Long before money existed, status inside a small human group was often decided by who could afford to waste resources publicly and survive the loss. The economist and sociologist Thorstein Veblen gave this behavior a name at the end of the 19th century. He called it conspicuous consumption, the practice of spending visibly and wastefully specifically because other people are watching. Monaco did not invent this instinct. It simply built an entire economy around hosting it. And there was a second layer, arguably even stranger than the first. The locals were banned from gambling in their own casino. Princess Caroline, credited with pushing the idea forward, insisted on this rule from the very beginning, and it has never been lifted. To this day, Monegasque citizens are legally barred from playing in the very casino that built their country, unless they happen to work there. Think about how counterintuitive that is. The government did not just permit gambling, it deliberately excluded its own population from the profits floor while keeping the tax revenue. Why would that make the whole arrangement more valuable rather than less? Because scarcity signals value and forbidden rooms feel more valuable than open ones. A casino everyone can enter is just a casino. A casino only foreigners can enter starts to feel like a secret, and secrets are irresistible to a species that spent most of its evolutionary history depending on insider information to survive. Knowing something others did not know once meant the difference between eating and starving. Your brain still treats access to a closed room as a kind of nourishment, even when the only thing behind the door is a roulette wheel. The plan worked almost immediately. By 1869, gambling revenue was so large that Monaco did something no other European state had done. It abolished direct income tax entirely. Suddenly, the Rock was not just a place to gamble, it was a place to keep your money afterward. This is the counterintuitive twist that most retellings of Monaco's stories skip past. The tax haven did not come first, the performance came first. Monaco had to convince the wealthy of Europe that this rock was worth visiting before it could convince them it was worth living in. The zero tax rate was not the hook, it was the follow-up offer, delivered only after curiosity and status had already done the hard work of getting people through the door. Once the reputation was set, everything else compounded around it. Grace Kelly's arrival as princess in 1956 turned Monaco into a Hollywood fixture almost overnight, adding a second, softer layer of glamour on top of the original gambling economy. Shipping magnate Aristotle Onassis quietly became the largest shareholder in the very company running the casino, tying Old World royalty to New World industrial fortune in a single building. The Monaco Grand Prix, first raced in 1929 through the same streets, tourists now walk past luxury boutiques, added speed and danger to the list of things Monaco could sell without owning a single natural resource. By the time Prince Rainier III worked to modernize the economy in the 20th century, gambling had already shrunk from roughly a third of state revenue down to a small single-digit percentage. It had done its job. It built the reputation. Banking, real estate, insurance, and luxury tourism took over as the actual engines of wealth, running on the same foundational trick the casino had established a century earlier. Make something scarce, make it feel exclusive. Let human psychology do the rest of the selling for free. None of this required Monaco to produce anything the world actually needed. No factories, no exports, no natural resource extracted from the ground. What Monaco extracted instead was something older and, in a strange way, more valuable. The instinct in your own mind that whispers a closed door must be hiding something worth having. You still carry that instinct today, even in rooms far smaller than a Monte Carlo casino. The velvet rope outside a club. The invite-only waitlist for a product you had never heard of a week earlier. The neighborhood everyone suddenly wants to live in the moment it becomes hard to get into. None of these things changed in quality overnight. What changed is access, and your brain reliably mistakes restricted access for genuine value because for most of human history, that mistake almost never cost you anything and often saved your life. So the next time a video of Monaco crosses your screen and your brain files it under fantasy before moving on, notice the actual mechanism working underneath the glamour. A tiny rock with no resources built an entire nation on the oldest exploit your species ever discovered. Not force, not fertility of land. Just a closed door, a rumor of wealth behind it, and a brain on the other side of the screen that still cannot help but wonder what it would feel like to be let in.